Hear that, fools? Big T here, back with another video. And in this video, I'm going to talk about basically what I've said before about how I'm feeling about current Nintendo and how I don't feel like they're the same. And I know it's negative, it's so negative all the time, but I don't feel like I'm being negative. I'm just pointing out things that I'm seeing that I'm not really feeling. And I don't know. I think it's weird for people to automatically, it's negative, like just pointing out something's flaws is a negative. I just don't think that way. But anyway, I've said before. I felt like I had a video years ago talking about the Triforce and how we lost Reggie. We lost. Basically, the Triforce for me was Reggie, Iwata, and Miyamoto, the figurative Triforce of Nintendo. And Miyamoto's taking a kind of a back seat. He's not really working in game design anymore. Reggie obviously retired, and Iwata unfortunately passed. So the Triforce is pretty broken right now. And there are other people in Nintendo that could pick up that Triforce and become the new versions, Koizumi and others, to name a few. But at this current state, we don't have that. And Nintendo, even back in the Yamauchi days, it was still had that Nintendo charm, had that Nintendo thing. And for me right now, I'm not feeling it. And it could be a number of factors. It could be that it's really true. It's a true thing that Nintendo charm isn't quite there, or it could just be I'm older and I don't feel charmed by Nintendo anymore. I don't think it's that, because like I said, there are things that are weighing into my belief on this, and one of them is the new president, Furukawa. From what I see, he just feels and seems like a numbers guy. I mean, not everybody can be a charismatic figurehead the way Iwata was, because Iwata's history is different. He was a gamer who became a programmer, and he just had, a different kind of energy to him, a different vibe. And I feel like once his light extinguished, something also extinguishing the company of Nintendo. And that's a normal thing to happen. It's natural when you have such a big figure like Iwata going away. You're going to lose something, obviously. But you would hope that seeds were planted, ideals will be maintained into the future. And it seemed that way in the beginning with 2017. With Nintendo, you had Koizumi. It looked like he was going to kind of replace Iwata. You can't really replace Iwata, but he's a very charismatic guy, and he seemed like a really good fit for Nintendo Directs. So it seemed like we had a chance to at least continue with that feel for Nintendo. But he slowly but surely started to disappear. I'll have a kind of side what I think happened there. I don't know. This is just my theory, a game theory. But yeah, I thought maybe a lot of stuff was going to retain. I remember Kimishima, who was an interim, he stepped in an emergency situation to cover for Iwata, and he talked about this is Iwata's plan that they're following. So I felt really confident, and it felt like that in the beginning. But now it doesn't. It's quite different. I think it happened in 2018. I want to say mid-2018. I don't know if it happened right when Furukawa took over. But he's a business guy. He's a numbers guy, and he's going to squeeze out the profits, and that means squeezing out a lot of Nintendo's fans' wallets. But they don't seem to mind. They don't mind for whatever reasons. A lot of them don't mind, and they'd rather even argue with me. But it is what it is. But anyway, so there was an article released. I'm not sure where it originally came from, but it was on Nintendo Everything. It currently is there. Titled Furukawa reflects on Iwata and Yamauchi his approach to leading Nintendo. So I started with Yamauchi, who was a business guy, but he had these credentials. He had these principles as a business guy. He did care about value as well. He cared about quality over quantity. He cared more about quality, and he cared about the value proposition. That's in my head right now because Juice was talking about it during the Juices Loose podcast. But the value proposition of Nintendo, they really cared about giving you a value. And if you look over the life of all the consoles, they did that. Even if it wasn't right up front, you got Nintendo Selects, cheaper, $40 off even some games, $20 off, $10 off, whatever, a select group of games. And you've always had that, and other things as well. Ambassadors program with the 3DS. They didn't have to do that, but Iwata again felt bad. He wanted to ensure the people who bought the 3DS early, that because they dropped the price, you guys were also, or us guys like me, who paid full price for 3DS, will get value out of it. So we got 20 games downloaded to our 3DS. Many of those games are still exclusive from the Ambassadors program. You can't get them anywhere else, and that's pretty cool. But there's always that value proposition that Nintendo used to give us. But now with Furukawa, it doesn't feel that way. You can look at the pricing structure on the Switch. You can look at the cost of games, the pricing of games, the pricing of ports, Wii U ports especially. That value proposition is pretty much dead. It's all about maximizing profits, which companies do. That's fine. But again, as a core Nintendo fan who's been around a long time, it's not something they've done. And it doesn't feel like my Nintendo anymore. But so there's an article that kind of accelerates my fears, if you will, and in many ways proves my theories, my thoughts on this. Now, I'll just say as a disclaimer that when you're translating Japanese, sometimes it's the content, or not content, sometimes the content, but the context of what's being saying could be off. I know that's going to be a defense, but I feel like this is correct, but it's just my feeling, But somebody saying, oh, it's probably a bad translation, that's not a fact either, okay? So we just have what we have here, which is the written interview. So I'll just quickly go over what Furukawa said when he was asked these things. So they asked, what sort of influences did past presidents like Mr. Iwata and Yamauchi have on you? Furukawa says, regrettably, I never spoke directly with Mr. Yamauchi. However, I've heard all about Yamauchi's philosophy from Iwata and his successor, Mr. Kimishima, at management policy briefings and yada, yada, yada. I don't want to get too much into it. Then they ask again, what did you learn from Mr. Iwata? Furukawa responds, I learned all sorts of things from Mr. Iwata, but it's best I refrain from mentioning specifics. He didn't like the fact that there are people still at Nintendo who say, I learned this from Mr. Iwata. We're confident that Iwata himself wouldn't approve of that, so that's why we keep that close to our hearts. That seems kind of weird. I kind of understand where he's coming from, but he seemed a little cagey about that. And there's kind of there's a company corporate speak that you could use to get out of that, and I just think that's a strange answer. But anyway, so they continue on. They ask, "Are you aiming for a management style that's different from Iwata?" I feel like he's getting annoyed a little bit when they keep mentioning Iwata. I mean, that's just it's just something for me. I can't really say that. But so he answers, right, his style isn't something that anyone can imitate. It's better to do what you can do in your own way, which I agree with. Iwata is, again, you can't mimic his charisma. You can't mimic his style, really. I mean, there's some things you can do, but I understand that. And then they ask outright, how will you lead Nintendo? So Furukawa answers this. Mr. Iwata's successor, Mr. Kimishima, took over as president In the emergency state following Iwata's sudden death, he worked on changing the way the company works so that it can be run without Iwata's charisma. My plan is to proceed down that route. Wow, that seems pretty strong. So Kimishima was, about moving the company forward without Iwata's charisma. And again, it could be a contextual issue where, the translation is a little off. But basically, he's saying that, my plan is to go without that stuff. And so without the charisma side. And I think that's bearing fruit when you look at Nintendo Directs specifically, because over that time, from 2017 to now, the charismatic guy, Koizumi and the like, I haven't seen. It's been very kind of newsletterish, video newsletterish. The Nintendo Directs have at this point. Before they were more playful. I remember like the Mario Kart 8 one, which was one of my favorites, quirky as hell. Stuff like that. Seeing Reggie doing his thing, working out, lifting Nintendo GameCubes and stuff like that. You don't really have guys around like that. Doug Bowser isn't that kind of guy, so he can't do it. But Furukawa specifically is saying, no, we're moving away from Iwata style. And to me, Iwata style is not just Iwata style. It's Nintendo style. Nintendo, before Iwata, had this kind of charm to them. And I made the comparison to Disney. Once Walt Disney died, sure, there were aspects of what Walt Disney did in the company that they lost. But the charm of Disney was still there. And in many ways, it still is today. Sure, they have their corporate kind of rip-offy ways, with their Disney Vault type of stuff that they do, where they lock things away and they release them for a limited time. You can only get it. Sure, they still do that business side stuff, but they still have that Disney charm. And for me, right now, Nintendo is losing that Nintendo charm. Now, a lot of that bores itself out in games, but also in presentation. That's also a big part of Nintendo. Obviously back then we had Nintendo Powers, and we had the VHS tapes coming and the demo disc. So it was very different. But even up until now, because you had the digital event stuff, you had the Nintendo Directs, which started under Iwata. You have all that stuff that asked for charisma because they started with that. Nintendo Directs is, those are charismatic events with some quirk to them. And to continue that on without that seems strange, especially when you're saying stuff like, we're going to be going in a less Iwata charismatic direction. So, I don't know. It's strange to me that more people don't see this or feel this. And I'm speaking specifically to core Nintendo fans. A lot of people, jump back onto Nintendo because of the Switch and its, popularity and its form factor, that kind of stuff. And so they don't have that history. A lot of people who play Smash today, don't really have that kind of core Nintendo fan history. Because Smash brings in people who don't really play it. A lot of people who don't really play Nintendo games. Of course, many Smash players do, but there's a lot of Smash players that aren't like core Nintendo fans. That grew up with what I'm talking about here. So, yeah, it feels. I hope I'm wrong. I hope something happens this year to turn my belief around on this, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Are you worried like me? Are you running around pants on fire, worried that Nintendo is changing? It feels like they are to me, but we'll see. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you as always for watching and listening, and see you folks next time. Peace out.